I welcome to the stage Twin patron and advisory board member and good friend Chris Gebhardt to lead this segment.
Thanks, Rob. Joining us are Dorit Donoviel and Kelly Larson. Dorit, you want to talk a little bit about where you're from and what you're doing?
So yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Third time at Twin, as great as the first time. Essentially, my job is to keep humans healthy in deep space. And I say deep space because it's very different than low Earth orbit. Because low Earth orbit, think of it as like the equivalent of your backyard. That's where we've been for the last 20 years, continuous human presence. But 50 years ago, we ventured beyond our backyard. We went to the moon. And so when we think about going into deep space, the problems become very different. So I am essentially leading a NASA-funded institute that's based at Baylor College of Medicine. We're partnered with Caltech and MIT. And my job is really to invest in technologies that can keep humans healthy in space. So I give grants, I take the money that NASA gives me, and then I turn around, we're an innovation institute, so we invest in things that are very high risk, potentially high reward, like things like perhaps human hibernation. The kind of stuff that NASA really isn't doing today, they probably should be. They want me to do that. So we invest in things that are really kind of far-reaching. And it's been just a wild ride, and I'm excited to tell you more about it.
That's so fantastic. This could be literally 3 days of discussion.
Yep.
Kelly?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Aquarian Space, and we are essentially connecting the solar system. So we are stringing relay satellites like cell phone towers through the solar system. So when we send missions to the moon or Mars or beyond, we need to get the data back, and that's what we're taking care of. And that looks like, right now it's science. We spend huge amounts of money to send missions to lunar and deep space and get science data back, but right now we only get a little bit of that data back. So, and what's happening right now is that last year there were 13 rovers, landers, and orbiters on and around the moon, and by the end of the decade we're looking at 200. So the moon is changing right now. There's a multi-billion-dollar economy coming. There's entire infrastructure coming. There are many robots coming, and soon there are people coming. So it's changing the game. And rather than me say more about that, I would love to hear just a little bit from you. What do you imagine happens? How does that impact us? If we're going to actually have a presence on the moon, things are radically changing, and then Mars. What are the implications? Anybody? Yeah.
Let's hope you do a better job there than we've done.
Well, that's one consideration, right? Is how are we going to do it? Are we going to go and just take it over? Are we going to be, toxic in how we relate?
But ownership, yeah, governance.
Governance is a major issue that I'm sure we'll talk about today. That's a major issue that we have to track. Yeah.
Pretty much in level of governance. Who owns the space? The company that built it, or the government where it originated?
Right. And we will talk about that, but they do have some regulations around that already. Right, who owns it when you land on the moon? Does somebody own it is a question. What does it mean if we're gonna, what are other implications that we want to think about? What is it for humanity? Yeah.
Well, I've been dialing in for the Moon Village Association meetings, and it occurred to me that we don't yet know what we might discover when we get there.
Exactly, and how it will change us and what the implications are for our children, for our children's children actually going, potentially living in space, definitely vacationing in deep space and lunar and deep space. Yeah, so that's a little bit. Okay, last one.
Currency.
Currency.
Intergalactic currency. There was a story about that in Forbes. Somebody's developing an intergalactic currency. We can think of all kinds of cool names.
Yeah.
So I have a question actually, building on that. So how many people walking in here up until 3 minutes ago had moon colonization on their card of things that were definitely going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years as absolutely happening and we're thinking about in some way? So not very many. I have to admit that I've got a sense of, is this really going to happen? Mm-hmm. Right? Are we really, and what you guys both said when we were backstage was, this is happening.
It's already a $1 trillion economy. There are 10,000 companies valued at over $1 trillion right now investing in space. I can't remember the number, but 21 billion, I think something like that, was invested just in 2021. 20 different sectors of industry, including finance, business, mining, engineering, science, pharmaceuticals, health tech, all over the place, communication, energy, so many things to be done in space. It's happening.
So from a fundraising perspective, I mean, are you seeing scads and scads of money coming your way? Is it?
Can I circle back to that? I want to reply to the last thing first, which is that there's a distinction that I want to make being in the moon and Mars side of things.
Yeah.
That there's a huge space economy right now that's really close to the Earth that we're very aware of. It's really great, and it's mostly about space for Earth. And what's happening right now in the next few years is that we're going to deeper space. We're going to the moon, we're going to Mars, and that's actually happening. And so speaking of fundraising, when I go out fundraising, most people say, oh, you're doing communications like Starlink, like, they give all these other examples. And yes, like that, except at the moon. So most of the things that are happening in space right now are for Earth, but very, very quickly right now, there is money coming from NASA, there's money coming from defense agencies, there is a lot of money coming from investors also for the moon and beyond. And it is, this trillion-dollar economy is now creating a multi-billion-dollar economy at the moon by the end of this decade that will grow very fast.
So the real question is, are we going to have better cell service on the moon than we do on the 405 during rush hour?
Yeah, probably because you don't have atmosphere and all kinds of other bandwidth issues. It's kind of clear up there. So
Nice.
Your signal should be nice and clear, except for perhaps the space radiation, which may damage some of the electronics. So that is a concern.
So that's actually a good transition point to some of your work. So if everyone's sort of focused near term in the neighborhood, right? The moon in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So not the backyard, but just beyond, right? But the real action for the future,
Mars.
according to Carl Sagan's, sage advice from 1994 through Time and Space, talking to us, is that we're going to have to get out there. That we are an exploring species, right? And that we're hunters and foragers, the frontier's everywhere, and it's still there. But getting out there means taking a lot of stuff with us and figuring a lot of stuff out. So this is the core of your work. Could you talk a little bit about
That's the core of my work. Yeah, and so actually Chris last night sent us some great questions, so got me thinking a little bit outside my comfort zone, which is what I love about this conference, Rob, is it gets me outside of my little bubble.
You've got a big comfort zone, Dorit. So
That's
that's a real
I'm comfortable
challenge.
with a lot of things that I probably shouldn't be, but anyway. No, but what's interesting about that is that what Carl said is should we focus on problems on Earth or go to space? It's not an either or, it's an and. So at least for us in the United States, you bitch and moan about how much we're putting in the space program. It's less than 0.5%. Let me say it again, less than 0.5% of our national budget. Okay, that's not even 1% of our national budget. It's less than 0.5% that we're investing in the space economy. Okay, but when we're thinking about deep space, and you asked us to think about pop culture and what kinds of things people can relate to. Okay, so I'm dating myself, but I love Star Trek. I'm a kid of the 60s, and I love Star Trek. And what they did right was the equality. Like you had Klingons and you had Vulcans and the later ones. Everybody was a mixed crew.
Absolutely.
And they did diversity and interracial relations.
You could say it was very woke, actually.
It was very woke for the 60s. I mean, the first black and white kiss on television. I mean, that was phenomenal. So they got that right. What they didn't get right, and what I'm irritated by, because people fail to understand how hard this is the warp speed. Okay, we don't have warp speed. We don't have warp speed, and we don't have artificial gravity. There are a lot of problems with the distances. Mars is so far away. It'll take us 6 months to get there with current capabilities. And then the planets, it's not a circular orbit, they're elliptical. So the planets have to be close together again for us to come back, which means you've got to wait 18 months on the Mars surface in order for Earth and Mars to be close together again so that you could take that next trip back 6 months. So add that up. That's a hell of a long time to be in a tin can with 3 people that your boss picked out for you to be your crewmates. okay? And you gotta bring all your food, you gotta bring all your medication, you gotta bring all the healthcare capabilities you're gonna need, and you're not gonna go outside, and you're not gonna experience walking on the beach, which I did late last night. I mean, it's the same environment. You're gonna smell the guy's, underarm smell. You can't really take a shower in space. You're gonna be breathing in all the dead skin cells that are sloughing off your skin, all your crewmates.
This sounds fantastic.
For 3 years. It is no picnic. It is no picnic.
It kind of sounds like my freshman year at college. So, Kelly, talking about connection, because I want to talk about propulsion in a second. So your company is working on the connection, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's going to be light, it's going to be lasers. What's it going to be that allows a better connection than what we have today when it takes 6-10 minutes? How long does it take for a signal to get back and forth?
I don't even know yet for Mars. We're really moon focused right now. We're doing Mars next. So I should know off the top of my head how many minutes.
It's a very twin statement. We're doing Mars next.
It's a 20-minute delay each way.
From Mars, depending on where it is.
Yeah, depending on where it is.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
as much as 40 minutes round trip. You say hi,
And you
40
wait.
minutes later, you hear a response back hi.
Right.
So autonomy, we got to be on our own.
Totally, yes. Yes, so that's what's happening with Mars. And right now, we don't even have good communication with the moon. So it's interesting, we have these GPS, we have this capability on Earth that's phenomenal, but right now at the moon, we're dealing with, kilobits per second coming down. It's very, very slow.
Yes.
So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna have, 4K live stream, like 4K video, in 2 years. So that's going to be a major change. That means every bit of science that goes up there, every bit of communication that goes, every bit of human needs that are up there are going to be able to get this high stream. And we can start it with RF. I mean, eventually optical's coming in, and there's all kinds of debates about that. But optical's not consistent enough right now to Earth.
But there's a clear product kind of development pipeline to see how
optical will come in.
that will solve that problem.
Eventually, hopefully, quantum will come in, and we can have instantaneous
The
communication.
innovations that you will be developing to enable this, people don't understand the implications for Earth.
Yeah.
Because what you
Yes.
don't realize is, so my boyfriend's mother had an MRI scan yesterday. A week ago, she had a CT scan, really scary. We think she might have a mini stroke going on, but the technology that allows us to stitch together the images to get MRI imaging came from stitching together images from the moon when they did that in the 60s. It led to the development of all the medical technology imaging capabilities that you take for granted today. What her company will be developing, what your company will be developing, Kelly, will absolutely transform everything on Earth here as far as data, communication, analysis, all of that.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big part of making the metaverse that we talked a lot about yesterday actually happen, right? Because we won't have a delay like we did on the video connections,
Well,
right?
metaverse is, I think, one new world that we're exploring, but I think that I'm also a really big fan of physical reality, personally. I think I like both.
Yeah.
One foot in both worlds. And I think taking this leap onto the moon is it's going to change humanity in a lot of ways. So yes, metaverse, but really I think it's actually just expanding our physical world. And humans change drastically when they go to space. So it's not like the research implications are massive, the science implications are massive, but actually humans getting off planet, if you've ever heard of people talk about the overview effect, most astronauts when they go to space, especially a little farther out, when they see the Earth with this very thin layer around it, just like this shiny jewel, just floating in space, suddenly something about the fragility and the preciousness of this planet, just like it changes them. I mean, they come back and they just like dedicate their lives to.
There's a book called The Overview Effect,
Yeah.
if any of you are interested in that.
Yeah.
And I actually heard that somebody's making a immersive experience to allow people to feel that, which I
Yes.
think is really cool.
Yeah.
So I actually think that eventually, if I really believe that, okay, right now it's the billionaires going to space, and there's a lot of backlash against that, and I get it. But think about 100 years ago, commercial aviation. I mean, who got to go across on airplanes when they first came out? It was the rich people. I get it, but the price is going to come down. In the last 20 years, there was 100-fold reduction in the cost of dollar per kilogram launch. 100-fold. It's going to come down even more.
yeah.
And so you're going to be able to experience space, and people are going to, they're already building hotels in space. Tom Cruise is going to make his next movie in space. He's already signed a deal.
Well, that's because gravity will let him be taller.
That's what it is. Yes. You grow about 2 inches, so he might
Top Gun
have.
fans, I guess.
He's going to leave behind
Tough
the
crowd.
platform shoes.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, okay, food,
Yeah.
behavioral.
Okay, mental health is
Radiation.
a big one. Radiation,
Autonomy.
and then medical autonomy, being able to do your healthcare. And her technology, Kelly's technology, being able to transmit back medical images to Earth are going to be critical because there's just so much AI you can do. You're going to eventually want to consult an expert.
So, because we're going to wrap up here in a second, but you said 3 words earlier: lost, liberty, and mystery.
Oh my God, I hate
And-
the 3 words thing. I hate that.
I
hate
but,
it.
But it's
Different 3-word thing. This is loss, liberation,
yeah.
and mystery.
mystery. So, so when we pack, when our descendants pack for this long-term travel beyond Mars, I'm assuming beyond Mars
Yeah,
at some point.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
right. Because once we get to the moon, then we're gonna go to Mars.
Yeah.
And we're gonna Mars, and we're like,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
next, right?
Yeah, okay.
So, loss, liberation. We're going to be losing something clearly. We're going to be liberated from Facebook, right? We're going to be liberated from our day-to-day, from all the stuff that we've been talking about that limits us, from all the things that we're hoping that the metaverse, solves for us, which won't, but maybe being out beyond Mars will. But then mystery as well. So big part, just as a total wildcard question,
Yeah.
how much of your work is delving into the need for mystery, our need as a species to invent gods and demons and spirits that even astronauts going up in space, they're hardwired to see something deeper and more meaningful in the most mundane things. I'm a brand guy, like we infuse toothpaste with deeper meaning. That's what we do, right?
God, it's
so
all about
how
that.
much do you do that?
Yeah, so mental health is absolutely in the top 3 or 4 things. Like you mentioned my 4 biggest worries: food, mental health, radiation, and medical capabilities. Yeah, meaningful work. Meaningful work is, you talk to any astronaut, they will tell you, meaningful work is the #1 thing to keep you sane. So it can't just be entertainment. It can't just be the metaverse playing around. You've got to be doing something purposeful with your life. So when you're an astronaut on a long duration mission and you've lost contact with Earth, you have to have meaningful work. And I am not religious myself, but I imagine the spirituality will become part of that.
Interesting. Could end up actually being heightened in some strange way
Yeah.
because you're closer to whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Kelly.
Lost, liberation, mystery. What
Yeah.
comes up for me with that is that this metaphor I've been using for a while is it's a little bit like when you're in the home and your oldest child goes to college, right? Now, we are actually going to have people that are going to start settling on the moon. And there's no way that we're not all impacted by that. Just like the house is impacted when the child leaves, even if there are other kids at home. Like when we start having humans going to the moon and living, our species is impacted because everything changes. All the possibilities for us change. Suddenly there are humans that are a part of who we are that are expanding to that. There's this idea that space is out there and we're here. But the reality is that we are, as much as we're a part of Earth and we came from and with this Earth, we are a part of that, right? So it's like I think there's a way that we're going to get to know ourselves better, and that's really going to be a lot.
You might say that we are made of cosmic star stuff.
Exactly. Thank you.
Somebody said that. Who was
Somebody
it?
said that. Who was that? So I'll just close with this. In 1902, one of the very first movies, again, a Frenchman, Méliès, did a film called Journey to the Moon. And you've all seen, you all can conjure the image in your head if you haven't watched the whole movie, but people on Earth pack into a cannon basically and shoot themselves to the moon. There's that amazing image of it landing on the moon and the moon being like, "Urgh," which, if I was the moon and a bunch of humans showed up, I'd be pissed off too.
It was black and white, and it was really funky.
Totally funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1902. 1902 we were talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now it's 2022, and we haven't been back in a long time, but you're saying
You're going.
it's happening.
It is
It's
absolutely
happening.
happening.
It is so exciting to contemplate. I remember being a kid, right, and of the Apollo era, and having toys and things, and I still have memories of that. And to have my kids have memories or be part of actually returning is really, really exciting. Very daunting, though. Very daunting.
Worth mentioning that the bigger explosion that you're really going to see is about 2025, is when really the traffic picks up. So just if you're curious.
Anything? Last thoughts?
We're going to go together. My problem, and I'm sorry, just want to take 10 seconds more. My problem is that space has been perceived as rich white men. And I'm trying so hard to engage the communities that did not come with us in the 60s, who were felt left behind, and you know what I'm talking about. We talked a little bit about that. And so the next thing we're gonna do is we just kicked off a project with an all-black crew, gonna take HBCU students to do a docuseries on the space, being a human in space, because we wanna bring those communities who were left behind in the 60s. We wanna bring them with us.
Wow, you just gave me goosebumps. We have so many, as Sagan said, rivers to cross, but you guys are the ones who are going to get us over it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.